After my wife passed away, we had the inheritance meeting. My daughter-in-law smiled coldly and said, "Now that the old woman is gone, you will put the company in my son's name and fend for yourself." I smiled. But when my lawyer walked into the room, he read the DNA test out loud. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family who underestimated your worth. My name is George Bennett. I am 67 years old. I had just returned to my estate after burying Patricia, my wife of 40 years. The reception was still taking place in the main hall of our home. Dozens of people dressed in black were standing around, holding crystal glasses and speaking in hushed tones. The caterers had not even begun to clear the porcelain plates of untouched food. The overwhelming scent of funeral lilies hung heavy in the air, mixing with the quiet murmurs of sympathy. I needed a moment of absolute silence away from the pitying stares of my neighbors and business associates. I walked down the long corridor away from the guests and stepped into my private study. I closed the heavy oak door behind me, expecting peace. Instead, I found my daughter-in-law Valerie sitting behind my desk in my leather armchair. She was adjusting her black designer dress with an expression that held absolutely no trace of grief. I walked over to the mahogany side table and poured myself a glass of water from the crystal pitcher. I did not ask why she was intruding in my private sanctuary during my wife's funeral. I waited in silence. Valerie did not offer condolences. She did not ask how I was holding up. She stood up from my chair and approached me with the confident stride of someone who believed she already owned the room. She looked me directly in the eye and told me that grief was a heavy burden to bear alone. She said I was simply too old and too emotionally fragile to carry the weight of Bennett Logistics anymore. My company is currently valued at $50 million. I built it from a single rusted delivery truck when I was 22 years old, working 18-hour shifts to secure local supply routes. I know every single metric invoice and employee in that corporation. I also know the exact anatomy of a hostile takeover. I was looking at one right now disguised as familial concern. Valerie demanded that I step down as chief executive officer by Monday morning. She insisted I transfer all my voting shares to my 35-year-old son Adam immediately, so he could assume full control of the empire I built. I took a slow sip of my water. I watched her eyes searching for any sign of hesitation, but there was none. She was striking deliberately, while she assumed I was blinded by sorrow. She knew Adam was incapable of making this demand himself. My son managed a single regional branch of my company and struggled with basic quarterly projections. Valerie was the true architect of this ambush, using my son as her proxy to seize power. Then she took her demands a step further, crossing a line I never thought possible. Valerie crossed her arms and told me that this sprawling estate was too large for a grieving widower to live in alone. She said it was impractical and depressing. She told me she and Adam needed the master suite to properly raise my 14-year-old grandson Leo. She claimed that Patricia had held her hand on her deathbed and promised the house to Leo to secure his future. It was a calculated and disgusting lie. Patricia had been in a medically induced coma for her final 3 days due to severe organ failure. She never spoke a single word to Valerie. She never held her hand. I knew the absolute medical truth of my wife's final moments, but I did not correct my daughter-in-law. I let her continue talking, letting her expose the full depth of her greed. I realized she had been waiting for Patricia to die for months, planning this exact conversation, while my wife took her last breaths. Valerie reached into her expensive handbag, which I had ironically paid for last Christmas. She pulled out a crisp legal document and slid it aggressively across the polished surface of my desk. She informed me it was a formal 30-day eviction notice drafted by her personal attorney. She smiled coldly, showing her teeth, and told me it was time to move aside for the next generation. She suggested I look into a modest retirement community down the coast, where I could be taken care of out of sight and out of mind. She expected me to scream. She expected an emotional breakdown. She assumed my shattered heart had destroyed my mind, making me an easy target to be bullied and discarded. She wanted a fight so she could point to my anger as proof of my mental instability to the funeral guests right outside my door. She was provoking me, hoping I would cause a scene that she could later use in court to prove I was unfit to manage my own affairs. I refused to give her the satisfaction. I set my water glass down on the table, making sure it did not make a sound. I picked up the eviction notice. I did not read the fine print or argue the legality of a daughter-in-law evicting a man from a home he owned outright. I simply folded the thick paper perfectly in half and placed it into the breast pocket of my suit jacket. I looked Valerie directly in the eyes, stripping away any warmth or familial affection I had ever shown her over the past 15 years. I politely asked her to leave my office and close the door behind her. She smirked, clearly believing her ambush had been a complete success. She thought my silence was submission. She thought the old man was broken and ready to surrender his life's work. She turned on her heel and walked out of the study, her high heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. The moment the heavy oak door clicked shut, my grief evaporated completely. It was replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I was not a broken old man ready to be sent to a nursing home. I was a chief executive who had just identified a critical threat to his empire. The war had silently begun, and I was going to utterly destroy her. I sit perfectly still in my leather chair, listening to the muffled sounds of my wife, Patricia, and her funeral reception bleeding through the heavy oak door of my private study. I had just politely asked my daughter-in-law, Valerie, to leave my office after she handed me a 30-day eviction notice. I locked the door from the inside. I need to understand Valerie and her absolute certainty. She is incredibly greedy, but she is not stupid. To march into my home and demand my resignation as chief executive officer on the very day I bury my wife, she must hold total leverage over my son Adam. I know my boy well. Adam is weak-willed, easily swayed, and terrified of confrontation. For him to allow his wife to threaten my empire directly to my face means she has him backed into a corner he cannot escape. I need to find the exact cage she built around him. I walk past my mahogany desk and approach the massive floor-to-ceiling bookshelf that lines the eastern wall of my study. I reach for a heavy leather-bound volume of classic literature that has not been moved in 20 years. I push the spine firmly backward. A heavy mechanical click echoes in the quiet room. The entire central section of the bookshelf slides forward and moves silently to the left on hidden steel tracks. Behind the polished wood paneling lies the true nerve center of Bennett Logistics. The wall is reinforced solid steel housing, a flush biometric vault that no one in my family knows exists. I press my right thumb against the thick glass scanner. A green light sweeps across my print, verifying my identity. Heavy internal deadbolts retract with a deep metallic thud. I grab the handle and pull the heavy steel door open. Inside the vault, there are no piles of emergency cash or gold bars. There is only a single specialized laptop connected directly to a private encrypted server. This machine is hardwired to bypass every standard firewall and security protocol operating within my corporate headquarters. It gives me absolute root access to every transaction, invoice, client contract, and private email within my $50 million empire. I carefully lift the laptop and carry it to my desk. I open the lid and the screen casts a pale blue glow over my hands. I log into the master system using my personal founder bypass codes. I completely bypass the board of directors, the chief financial officer, and the internal corporate auditors. I go straight into the raw, unedited financial data of the regional distribution hub that my son Adam has managed for the past 4 years. I pull up the quarterly reports for his specific branch. On the surface, everything looks perfectly normal and meticulously balanced. The branch is reporting steady revenue and consistent delivery times across all major shipping routes. To a standard internal auditor, Adam looks like a highly competent manager simply holding the line and doing his job. But I am not a standard corporate auditor. I built this supply chain network with my bare hands over 4 decades. I know exactly how much it costs to run a fleet of heavy freight trucks across state lines. I know the current market price of commercial diesel routine vehicle maintenance and driver overtime down to the absolute penny. I ignore the revenue reports and dive directly into the operational expenditures. Within 10 minutes, the illusion of competence begins to shatter completely. The ledger is bleeding. The branch is hemorrhaging capital at a terrifying and unsustainable rate. I isolate the supply chain contracts for the last 18 months to trace the exact source of the financial leak. Our logistics company relies heavily on secondary independent freight contractors to handle overflow shipping volume during peak holiday seasons. Historically, Adam used 3 highly vetted local logistics companies for this necessary overflow. But looking at the current ledger, those 3 reliable vendors have been entirely phased out of our system. Instead, all of the regional overflow shipping contracts have been deliberately funneled into a single massive vendor account. The new company is listed under a generic corporate name registered in a neighboring state. I highlight the vendor profile and pull the complete payment history. The numbers on the screen make my blood run cold. My son has authorized millions of dollars in corporate payouts to this one specific entity. The payments are structured perfectly to fly just beneath the critical threshold that would require automatic signature approval from the corporate headquarters. Adam is approving individual invoices for $99,000 week after week, routing our hard-earned profits into an absolute black hole. I lean closer to the monitor, analyzing the specific billing codes. My breathing slows down until the room is completely silent. I am no longer a grieving husband, mourning the loss of his wife. I am a predator, tracking a distinct scent of betrayal. The invoices are charging for maximum weight loads on routes that have historically never required heavy transport. They are adding extreme fuel surcharges for empty trucks and billing for phantom freight runs that simply do not exist in our operational reality. I run a trace on the banking routing numbers attached to the generic vendor account. I bypass the initial corporate shell layers using a forensic financial tracking program I purchased years ago to monitor potential corporate espionage. The software works quickly to strip away the generic company name. It peels back the registered agent status and digs ruthlessly through the state tax filings until it reaches the ultimate beneficiary of the account. The name flashes on my screen in bold black letters. Vincent. I stare at the name as the missing pieces of the puzzle aggressively lock into place. Vincent is Valerie's older brother. He is an arrogant man who claims to be an independent investment consultant, but drives foreign luxury cars and owns multiple expensive vacation homes without managing a single legitimate business to his name. The trap is completely visible now. Adam has not been managing his regional branch. He has been systematically dismantling it from the inside out. He has been funneling massive, highly lucrative corporate supply chain contracts into a shell company owned entirely by his brother-in-law. My son is paying Vincent millions of dollars for ghost freight runs that never actually take place. Valerie is not just a greedy daughter-in-law trying to steal my estate. She is the ruthless mastermind of a massive corporate embezzlement ring. She is using her husband as a human shield to bleed my life's work dry. She controls Adam absolutely, because if this massive fraud is ever brought to light, Adam is the one whose digital signature is on every single illegal invoice. Adam is the one who will go to federal prison for wire fraud, corporate theft, and conspiracy. Valerie and Vincent have him completely trapped, holding his freedom hostage to secure their lavish lifestyle. They have weaponized my own son against my legacy. Valerie thought she had the ultimate upper hand today. She believed that because I was burying my wife, I would simply retreat into my grief and hand over the keys to the kingdom without checking the locks. She assumed I would blindly transfer my voting shares to Adam, effectively giving her absolute legal control to drain the remaining $40 million from the parent company without any oversight. She wanted to remove me from the board entirely, so no one would ever audit her brother's phantom shipping contracts. I do not slam my fists on the desk in anger. I do not shout into the empty room. I feel an absolute chilling calm wash over my entire body. I carefully save all the compromised ledgers, the routing numbers, and the shell company tax documents onto a secure encrypted flash drive. I eject the drive and place it into the breast pocket of my suit, directly next to the eviction notice Valerie had the audacity to hand me. I have found her leverage. I have uncovered the financial tumor growing inside my company. Valerie thinks she has cornered a vulnerable old man, but she has simply invited her own total destruction. The war has moved from my living room into the very foundation of my empire, and I am fully prepared to burn her world to the ground. I sit perfectly still in my leather chair, listening to the muffled sounds of my wife Patricia and her funeral reception bleeding through the heavy oak door of my private study. I had just politely asked my daughter-in-law Valerie to leave my office after she handed me a 30-day eviction notice. I locked the door from the inside. I need to understand Valerie and her absolute certainty. She is incredibly greedy, but she is not stupid. To march into my home and demand my resignation as chief executive officer on the very day I bury my wife, she must hold total leverage over my son, Adam. I know my boy well. Adam is weak-willed, easily swayed, and terrified of confrontation. For him to allow his wife to threaten my empire directly to my face means she has him backed into a corner he cannot escape. I need to find the exact cage she built around him. I must secure the personal fortifications of my estate before I dismantle my daughter-in-law. My immediate priority is Patricia and her medical trust. My wife established a private medical directive years ago to manage her long-term care and end-of-life expenses. Now that she has passed away, I must formally transfer the remaining funds and administrative control back into my sole name. If I leave those legal avenues open, Valerie will undoubtedly find a way to exploit them. I walk down the silent hallway and enter Patricia's private sitting room. The space still smells faintly of her lavender perfume. I ignore the physical ache in my chest. Grief is a luxury I can no longer afford. I approach her antique mahogany filing cabinet. Patricia was meticulously organized. She kept detailed physical records of every family member, every medical appointment, and every legal document. I pull open the top drawer and begin sorting through the thick manila folders. I am looking for the documents labeled with the estate trust insignia. My hands move mechanically, flipping through years of dental records, vaccination histories, and specialist referrals. I pull a heavy stack of files from the back of the drawer to reach the legal binders. As I lift the stack, a single folder slips from the center. It hits the Persian rug with a soft thud. I look down. The tab on the folder is clearly labeled with the name of my 14-year-old grandson, Leo. I kneel to pick it up. The folder is overstuffed with pediatric records and school physicals. As I gather the papers, a specific document slides out and separates from the rest. It is a crisp, white sheet of paper bearing the official logo of the Regional General Hospital. I recognize the date printed at the top. It is from a minor emergency room visit 3 months ago. Leo had taken a hard fall during a weekend lacrosse tournament and fractured his left collarbone. Patricia had rushed to the hospital to sit with him while Adam was supposedly working late at the regional branch. I pick up the intake form, intending to slide it back into the folder. My eyes automatically scan the printed text. It is a standard medical evaluation. It lists his height, weight, known allergies, and emergency contact information. But my gaze suddenly locks onto a small rectangular box located in the upper right corner of the page. The box is designated for the patient's blood type. Printed inside that box in stark black ink are the letters AB. I stop breathing. The silence in the room becomes absolute and heavy. I stare at the 2 letters printed on the official hospital document. A B. I do not move. My mind immediately shifts away from the emotion of a grandfather and locks onto the cold, unforgiving laws of biological science. I am an analytical man. I built a logistics empire based on precise calculations and undeniable facts. I apply that same brutal logic to the piece of paper trembling slightly in my hand. I know my own medical history perfectly. I spent 2 years serving in the military before I bought my first delivery truck. My dog tags and my medical records definitively state that I am blood type O. I know my late wife's medical history with equal certainty. I sat beside Patricia through countless surgeries, blood draws, and transfusions during her final years. Her medical charts are permanently burned into my memory. Patricia was also blood type O. The science of human genetics is not a matter of opinion or negotiation. It is absolute. The laws of genetic inheritance dictate that a child receives one blood type allele from the father and one from the mother. Blood type O is a recessive genetic trait. It requires two O alleles to manifest. Therefore, a person with type O blood only possesses O alleles to pass on to their offspring. Because Patricia and I were both completely type O, we could only pass O alleles to our children. It is biologically impossible for two type O parents to produce a child with any other blood type. My son Adam is absolutely and undeniably blood type O. I know this for a fact. I was there when he was born. I remember the pediatric records. I know the truth of my own son. Adam carries only the recessive O alleles. I look back down at the hospital intake form. Leo is type AB. The genetic impossibility hits me with the force of a freight train. In order for a child to have type AB blood, they must inherit an A allele from one parent and a B allele from the other parent. It does not matter what blood type Valerie possesses. She could be type A, type B, or type AB. It is completely irrelevant. Adam is type O. Adam has no A allele to give. Adam has no B allele to give. A father with type O blood cannot under any biological circumstance produce a child with type AB blood. The math is flawless. The science is irrefutable. Leo is not Adam's biological son. I lower myself into the armchair beside the filing cabinet. I read the document again and again, searching for a clerical error or a typo. But I know hospital blood typing is executed with absolute precision before any potential surgical intervention. The document is authentic. The boy I have loved for 14 years, the boy who carries my last name, the boy who Valerie uses as her ultimate bargaining chip, is a biological stranger to the Bennett family line. The sheer scale of the deception is staggering. Valerie has been lying since the very beginning of her marriage to my son. She trapped Adam with a pregnancy that did not belong to him. For 14 years, she has paraded Leo around our estate, demanding the best schools, the best clothes, and the largest share of the family resources, all based on his status as my sole biological grandson and the future heir to the Bennett logistics empire. Just an hour ago, Valerie stood in my private study and demanded that I hand over my company and vacate my primary estate. She claimed that the house rightfully belonged to Leo to secure the bloodline. She demanded the immediate transfer of wealth to protect her child's future. Her entire hostile takeover relies on her unshakable position as the mother of the Bennett heir. But her throne is constructed entirely of lies. My mind immediately connects the biological fraud to the financial hemorrhage I discovered in the hidden vault. Adam has been systematically draining his regional branch, funneling millions of dollars into a shell company owned by Valerie's brother, Vincent. Why would my son commit federal wire fraud for a man he barely tolerates? The terrifying answer begins to form in the cold logic of my mind. Extortion. Valerie must know the truth about Leo. Vincent must know the truth. They are holding this devastating secret over my son's head. Or perhaps Adam does not know the truth at all, and he is simply a blind victim being manipulated by a woman who secured his absolute loyalty through a fraudulent child. I do not feel sorrow. I do not shed a single tear for the destruction of my family tree. I feel a sharp, dangerous clarity. Valerie believes she holds all the cards. She believes she can march into my home on the day of my wife's funeral and dictate the terms of my surrender. She thinks she has secured the ultimate leverage, but she has made a fatal miscalculation. She assumed I would never look at the fine print. I carefully place the hospital intake form back into the manila folder. I do not leave it in Patricia's filing cabinet. This document is no longer a simple medical record. It is a weapon of mass destruction. I carry the folder out of the sitting room and walk back into my private study. I reopen the hidden biometric vault behind the bookshelf. I place the folder directly next to the encrypted flash drive containing the evidence of her corporate embezzlement. Valerie wants to steal my empire based on the sanctity of the family bloodline. I will give her exactly what she wants. I will assemble the lawyers. I will arrange the official inheritance meeting she so desperately craves. I will let her sit at the head of my mahogany table and demand the keys to my kingdom. And then I will clinically, publicly, and legally eradicate her entire existence. The foundation of her fraud has just been exposed, and I am going to tear her world apart, piece by piece. The morning sun filters through the large bay windows of my quiet home. I am sitting in the kitchen drinking black coffee. I have barely slept, but my mind is sharper than it has been in decades. The hospital intake form locked inside my vault confirmed a biological impossibility. Leo is not my biological grandson. Valerie has built her entire hostile takeover on a massive genetic fraud. But a single hospital document is not enough to destroy her in a court of law. A judge will demand irrefutable absolute proof. I need a certified legal DNA test, and I need to obtain the genetic material without Valerie realizing she is being hunted. The doorbell rings sharply, shattering the morning silence. I stand up and walk down the long hallway. I open the heavy front door. Valerie is standing on my porch. She is wearing a designer coat and oversized sunglasses. Standing next to her is my 14-year-old grandson, Leo. He is staring down at his phone, completely absorbed in a video game. He is wearing headphones and carrying a heavy backpack. Valerie does not wait for an invitation. She pushes past me and strides directly into my foyer, pulling Leo along by the sleeve of his jacket. She turns to me and sighs loudly. She tells me she has a terribly busy schedule today. She claims she has absolutely essential shopping to do in the city and cannot be bothered to drag a teenager through the high-end boutiques. She tells me I am going to watch Leo for the afternoon. She does not ask if I have plans. She does not request a favor. She simply drops her child at my feet, treating me like an unpaid servant in the very house she plans to evict me from. She checks her reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting her hair. She tells me not to let him eat junk food and immediately walks back out the front door. She does not say goodbye. I watch her luxury SUV pull out of my driveway. I do not feel insulted by her arrogance. I feel a deep, profound sense of victory. Valerie thinks she is asserting her dominance over a broken old man. In reality, she has just personally delivered the exact biological specimen I need directly into my hands. I turn my attention to Leo. He has already wandered into the main living room and thrown his backpack onto the expensive cream-colored sofa. He slumps down onto the cushions, keeping his headphones over his ears. His thumbs move rapidly across the screen of his device. He does not look up at me. He is a teenager completely disconnected from the brutal war being waged around him. I do not feel anger toward the boy. He is simply a pawn in his mother's fraudulent game. I walk into the kitchen. I open the heavy stainless steel refrigerator. I pull out a glass pitcher of pulp-free orange juice. I reach into the high cabinet and select a heavy crystal tumbler. I deliberately choose a glass with a wide, thick rim. I pour the cold juice into the crystal glass. I place it on a small silver tray along with a linen napkin. I carry the tray into the living room and approach the sofa. I stand in front of Leo until he notices my shadow. He pulls one headphone off his ear and looks up with a look of mild annoyance. I offer him the tray. I tell him it is fresh and that he should drink something before he plays his games all morning. Leo mutters a quick word of thanks. He takes the heavy crystal glass with his bare hand. He brings it to his mouth and takes several long gulps of the cold juice. His lips press firmly against the thick crystal rim. He lowers the glass, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He places the half-empty glass onto the wooden coffee table. He slides his headphone back over his ear and instantly returns to his digital world. The biological transfer is complete. I wait for 10 minutes to ensure he is completely distracted. I tell him I have some paperwork to organize in my study and that he should make himself comfortable. He simply nods without breaking his gaze from the glowing screen. I walk over to the coffee table. I pull a clean pair of latex gloves from my pocket and slip them onto my hands. I carefully pick up the crystal glass, holding it strictly by the heavy bottom base to avoid contaminating the rim. I carry the glass into my private bathroom and lock the door behind me. I open the medicine cabinet and retrieve a brand new sealed first aid kit. I tear open the plastic wrapping and extract a sterile cotton swab and an empty hard plastic specimen tube. I hold the glass steady under the bright bathroom vanity lights. I can clearly see the slight smudge where the boy's lips touched the crystal. I take the sterile cotton swab and firmly rub it along the exact curvature of the smudge. I rotate the cotton tip, ensuring I collect an adequate sample of his saliva and epithelial cells. My movements are methodical and clinically precise. When I am satisfied with the collection, I carefully insert the swab into the hard plastic tube. I snap the tight lid shut, sealing the evidence securely inside. I pull off the latex gloves and throw them into the trash. I wash the crystal glass thoroughly with hot water and heavy soap, destroying any remaining trace of my actions. I place the sealed evidence tube into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. I walk back into the living room. Leo has not moved an inch. He is shouting instructions into his headset, completely oblivious to his surroundings. I tell him I need to run a quick errand in town and that he is old enough to stay alone in the house for an hour. He gives me a thumbs-up gesture and continues playing. I walk out to my garage and get into my car. I do not drive toward my corporate headquarters. I drive toward the northern edge of the city to a private independent forensics laboratory I researched early this morning. This facility specializes in discrete legal DNA testing for high-profile clients. They do not ask unnecessary questions and they guarantee absolute confidentiality. I walk into the sterile white reception area. The clinic is quiet and highly professional. I approach the receptionist and request an expedited paternity profile. I am ushered into a private consultation room with a senior lab technician. I place the sealed plastic tube onto the steel table. I instruct the technician that I need a comprehensive genetic profile extracted from the sample, and I need it cross-referenced to determine absolute paternal lineage. The technician informs me that an expedited legally admissible process requires a significant premium fee. I do not hesitate. I reach into my leather briefcase and pull out a thick stack of $100 bills. I place $5,000 in crisp, uncirculated cash onto the steel table. The technician looks at the money and immediately nods. He assures me that paying in cash guarantees complete anonymity and that the certified results will be delivered directly to my private encrypted email within 48 hours. I thank him and walk out of the clinic. The trap is now officially armed. I get back into my car and start the engine. Before I can put the vehicle into drive, my cell phone vibrates sharply in my pocket. I pull it out. The screen displays an urgent notification from my home security application. The system has detected multiple unauthorized individuals entering the front door of my estate. I tap the notification and open the live camera feed covering my main foyer. The high-definition video loads instantly on my screen. I stare at the footage in absolute disbelief. Valerie did not go shopping in the city. She is walking through my front door, followed closely by 3 large men wearing gray matching uniforms. The uniforms belong to a high-end residential moving company. I switch the camera view to the formal dining room. Valerie is standing in the center of the room, holding a digital tablet. She is pointing aggressively at the massive antique mahogany dining table that Patricia and I purchased in Italy 30 years ago. The movers step forward and begin wrapping the fragile chairs in thick protective blankets. I switch the feed to the main living room. Another mover is standing next to my late wife's grand piano, holding a yellow tape measure calculating the dimensions of the instrument. Valerie walks into the frame. She points to a rare oil painting hanging above the fireplace and gestures for the movers to take it down. She is actively dismantling my home while I am away. She could not even wait for the 30-day eviction notice she handed me yesterday to expire. Her greed has made her completely reckless. She assumes I am a weak, grieving widower sitting in a park somewhere mourning my dead wife while she strips my estate of its most valuable heirlooms to furnish whatever property she plans to occupy next. I grip the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turn white. I do not call the police to report a robbery. I do not call Valerie to scream at her. I sit in my car in the parking lot of the forensics laboratory and watch the live feed of her arrogance. She believes she is clearing out the remnants of a dead empire. She has no idea that every single item she touches, every measurement she takes, and every boundary she crosses is only digging her grave deeper. I turn off the phone screen and put the vehicle into gear. I am not going to stop her today. I am going to let her believe she has won. I am going to let her feel invincible because when the biological results arrive in 48 hours, her total destruction will be absolute. I drive away from the clinic with a cold, quiet smile on my face. I pull out of the forensic laboratory parking lot and merge onto the interstate. I do not return to my invaded estate. I drive in the exact opposite direction, heading toward the towering glass and steel structure of Bennett Logistics headquarters. My hands rest steadily on the steering wheel. The digital clock on my dashboard reads 1 in the afternoon. Valerie and Adam believe I am wandering the city consumed by the recent loss of my wife. They believe my absence gives them the perfect cover to accelerate their embezzlement and dismantle my home. They are entirely wrong. My grief has been replaced by a singular surgical focus. I must amputate the infected limb of my empire before the rot spreads to the vital organs. I pull my vehicle into the reserved underground parking garage. I take the private executive elevator directly to the top floor. The doors glide open to reveal the silent, carpeted halls of my corporate sanctuary. My executive assistant stands up abruptly when she sees me. She expects to offer condolences. I raise my hand to stop her before she can speak a single word. I instruct her to immediately summon my chief financial officer, my chief legal counsel, and my head of operations to the main boardroom. I tell her to cancel their afternoon schedules, forward their calls, and lock the boardroom doors behind them. No one else is allowed inside. I walk into the massive room and take my seat at the head of the long, polished table. These 3 executives are not simply employees. They are loyalists. They stood beside me 30 years ago when we fought to secure our first national freight contracts. They know my mind, and they know my methods. Within 5 minutes, the heavy wooden doors open, and they step inside. They take their seats in complete silence. They look at my face and instantly understand that we are not here to discuss funeral arrangements. They recognize the expression of a man preparing to go to war. I do not waste time with pleasantries. I open my briefcase and extract the encrypted flash drive I pulled from my biometric vault earlier this morning. I slide it across the smooth table toward my chief financial officer. I order him to open the drive and project the financial records of the regional distribution hub managed by my son. The massive digital screen on the far wall flickers to life. Rows of complex data and billing codes illuminate the darkened room. I instruct them to look closely at the external vendor payments over the last 18 months. It takes less than 60 seconds for my chief financial officer to spot the devastating anomaly. He pales as he identifies the millions of dollars systematically funneled into the generic shell company. He recognizes the phantom freight runs, the exorbitant fuel surcharges, and the completely fabricated heavy transport invoices. He looks at me with absolute horror. My chief legal counsel leans forward, examining the digital signatures authorizing the payments. She sees my son Adam's name attached to every single fraudulent transaction. I inform them that the shell company belongs to a man named Vincent. I explain that Vincent is closely tied to my daughter-in-law Valerie. I state clearly that my son is actively bleeding the company dry to fund their lifestyle and cover up his own catastrophic liabilities. I do not mention the biological fraud regarding my grandson. That is a personal weapon I am reserving for the final execution. Right now, we are dealing purely with corporate survival. My head of operations asks if we should immediately involve federal authorities and have Adam arrested for wire fraud. I shake my head. Arresting Adam right now would tip off Valerie and give Vincent time to move the stolen millions into untouchable offshore accounts. It would also tie up Bennett Logistics in a massive public federal investigation. that could severely damage our reputation with our legitimate national clients. I have a much more effective and silent method of execution. I instruct my chief legal counsel to open the original corporate charter that Patricia and I drafted 40 years ago. I tell her to locate a highly specific contingency framework buried deep within the foundational bylaws. It is a safeguard Patricia and I designed specifically to protect our life's work from hostile corporate raiders or compromised board members. We called it the Founders Clause. It grants the original founding majority shareholder the unilateral emergency authority to restructure client assets, restructure corporate divisions, and completely isolate compromised internal branches without requiring a majority board vote. For the next 4 hours, the boardroom becomes a bunker of absolute intense focus. We do not take breaks. We do not speak above a low murmur. We work with the ruthless efficiency of a tactical military operation. My chief legal counsel rapidly drafts the incorporation documents for a brand new, completely invisible limited liability company. It is a ghost entity registered under a blind trust that only I control. It has no public ties to Bennett Logistics, but holds the exact same operational clearance. My chief financial officer and my head of operations begin the massive task of surgically extracting our legitimate corporate assets. We systematically transfer 90% of the active high-value supply chain contracts away from Adam's regional hub. We reroute the billing structures, the dispatch protocols, and the client payment deposits directly into the new ghost entity. We perform this massive migration silently through the internal administrative servers. We do not notify the regional branch. We do not notify Adam. We leave the regional hub completely intact on the surface. Adam still has his office, his title, and his employees. The delivery trucks will still run their standard daily routes. The phones will still ring. But beneath the cosmetic surface, the branch has been entirely hollowed out. It is a mathematically dead structure. We have severed its connection to the corporate treasury. The incoming revenue stream has been permanently diverted into my secure vault. As the sun begins to set over the city skyline, my chief financial officer hits the final execution key on his laptop. The digital migration is complete. He looks up at me and confirms that the regional hub now possesses exactly 0 operational capital. It holds only enough residual funds to cover standard employee payroll for the next 2 weeks. The trap is now perfectly set. Adam and Valerie believe they have successfully pushed a grieving old man to the edge of retirement. They believe they have unchecked access to a bottomless corporate treasury. They are entirely oblivious to the financial guillotine hanging directly over their necks. Within the next few days, Vincent will inevitably submit another fraudulent invoice for a phantom freight run. Adam will blindly approve the transaction using his digital proxy signature. He will attempt to wire another massive payment into Valerie's waiting hands, but this time the transaction will not process. When they attempt their next massive withdrawal, they will find an empty account. The automated banking system will instantly reject the transfer due to insufficient funds. The sudden catastrophic failure of their primary income stream will trigger absolute panic. Vincent will demand his money. Valerie will turn on Adam. Their entire fraudulent empire built on the illusion of infinite wealth will collapse in a matter of seconds. They will realize they are trapped in a burning building with no exits. I thank my 3 loyal executives for their unwavering dedication. I instruct them to return to their normal duties tomorrow and maintain absolute secrecy. I pack my briefcase and walk out of the boardroom. The corporate bleeding has stopped. My empire is fully secured. Now I can dedicate my absolute focus to the total personal destruction of the woman who thought she could steal my legacy. I step into the elevator and watch the doors slide shut, preparing for the next phase of the war. I leave the corporate headquarters of Bennett Logistics and drive back toward my suburban estate. I need to maintain the illusion of a grieving widower stumbling blindly through his new lonely reality. Valerie and Adam must believe I am entirely focused on my sorrow and completely ignorant of their ongoing hostile takeover. To sell this performance, I stop at a high-end grocery store a few miles from my neighborhood. Patricia used to handle all the household shopping. It is entirely logical for a newly widowed man to wander the aisles of a supermarket trying to figure out how to feed himself. I take a metal cart and walk slowly through the fresh produce section. I select a few simple items: fresh fruit, dark roasted coffee, plain artisan bread. I place them in the cart with the slow, deliberate movements of an exhausted old man trying to hold his life together. I push my cart up to the checkout counter. The young cashier scans my items quickly and efficiently. She smiles politely and announces the total. It is a trivial amount, $34.12. I pull my sleek leather wallet from the inner pocket of my suit jacket. I extract my primary platinum debit card, which is tied directly to my main personal checking account. I insert the metal chip into the payment terminal. The machine processes the request for 3 seconds. Then it emits a sharp negative beep. The small digital screen flashes a bright red message: "Transaction declined." The cashier looks at me with a sympathetic expression, assuming my bank simply flagged a suspicious purchase or encountered a minor network error. She asks me to try inserting the card one more time. I comply. I push the chip back into the reader. The machine beeps again. The red text remains identical: "Please contact your financial institution." I do not panic. I do not ask the cashier to try a third time. I do not raise my voice or show any outward sign of distress. I apologize quietly, tell her I must have picked up the wrong card, and step away from the checkout lane, leaving my groceries behind. I walk out through the automatic sliding glass doors into the cool afternoon air. I pull my smartphone from my pocket and open my primary banking application. I scan my thumb over the biometric login. The screen loads, but my usual high balances do not appear. Instead, a solid gray alert box locks the entire interface, preventing me from accessing any financial data. The bold text informs me that all primary checking, savings, and personal investment accounts have been placed under a strict administrative freeze. I tap the Details tab to investigate the origin of the lockdown. The freeze was initiated exactly 2 hours ago by the designated secondary account proxy. That proxy is my son, Adam. During Patricia's final year of severe illness, the medical emergencies became frequent and chaotic. I legally granted Adam limited proxy authorization over our personal household accounts to ensure bills would be paid if I was incapacitated or actively sitting beside my wife in an intensive care unit. It was a legal mechanism born out of absolute trust and necessity. I never revoked it after she passed. Valerie has now weaponized that lingering legal courtesy against me. The banking alert cites the specific reason for the total financial lockdown. It reads, "Suspected elder cognitive decline." I stand in the asphalt parking lot staring at the digital notice on my phone screen. Valerie is executing a textbook medieval siege tactic. She knows she cannot force me out of my own home with a simple eviction notice drafted by a low-level attorney. She needs to break my resistance completely from the inside out. By freezing my liquid personal assets, she believes she has successfully severed my supply lines. Without access to my primary funds, she assumes I cannot hire a high-powered defense attorney. I cannot buy food for my kitchen. I cannot pay the utility bills or maintain the sprawling estate. She wants me desperate, starving, and terrified of losing my independence. She wants me to crawl back to my private study, fall to my knees, and beg Adam to release the funds in exchange for signing over my company and my home. It is a ruthlessly effective strategy against a normal 67-year-old man. Most retirees would crumble under the sheer terror of suddenly losing access to their life savings. But I am not a normal man, and Valerie has fundamentally miscalculated the depth and complexity of my financial architecture. She believes my wealth exists solely within the boundaries of the accounts she can see. I put my smartphone back into my pocket. I know Valerie is likely monitoring my cellular activity, waiting for the frantic phone call to my son, demanding an explanation for the frozen accounts. I will not give her the satisfaction of hearing me panic. I will not make a single sound. I walk across the grocery store parking lot toward a dilapidated strip mall situated near the edge of the property line. Against the cracked brick wall sits an old analog public payphone. It is a weathered relic covered in graffiti, but it is exactly what I need right now. It is completely untraceable and unrecorded. I drop a handful of silver quarters into the coin slot. I dial a lengthy international number entirely from memory. The line clicks heavily and routes through a secure, encrypted satellite connection, bridging the gap across the Atlantic Ocean. A sophisticated automated voice answers in French. I press a specific sequence of numbers on the rusted keypad, navigating the hidden menu until the system connects me to a live representative. A man with a thick European accent answers, confirming he is speaking for a highly exclusive private wealth management firm located in Geneva, Switzerland. I provide my assigned alphanumeric client identifier. I recite a randomized security phrase that Patricia and I established 15 years ago, specifically designed for catastrophic financial emergencies. The representative verifies my identity instantly. I instruct him to fully activate my secondary offshore portfolio. This is a ghost account entirely disconnected from my American identity, immune to any domestic proxy authorization, and completely invisible to any stateside banking institution. I listen to the swift clicking of the representative typing on his secure terminal. He confirms that the account holds slightly over $7 million in diversified liquid global assets. I order him to immediately wire $200,000 into an anonymous holding trust that I control through a private legal proxy. I instruct him to link a new digital international debit card directly to my smartphone, bypassing all domestic banking networks and regulations. The representative confirms the transfer has been executed and the digital card issuance is complete. The entire phone call takes exactly 3 minutes from start to finish. I hang up the heavy plastic receiver and listen to the dial tone. I pull out my smartphone and open a secure digital wallet application. The black international card appears on my screen, instantly holding a massive, untraceable balance ready for immediate global deployment. Valerie tried to cut off my oxygen to watch me suffocate in my own home. Instead, she has forced me to open a massive financial vault she can never touch and can never conquer. Her absolute leverage has just been liquidated into thin air, and she is entirely unaware that her siege has already failed. I turn my back on the payphone and walk toward my car with a steady, confident stride. I am fully funded, fully armed, and ready to let my daughter-in-law continue digging her own grave. The quiet hum of my suburban estate is broken by the sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway. I am sitting in my private study reviewing the confirmation email from the Swiss bank on my secured smartphone. The $200,000 I requested have been successfully routed into my anonymous holding trust, and my new digital debit card is fully operational. Valerie's attempt to starve me out financially has completely failed, but she does not know that yet. She still believes I am trapped inside my home, isolated, grieving, and terrified. I hear the heavy oak front door swing open. Valerie has used her key again, but this time she is not alone. I hear a second set of footsteps, softer, more measured, moving across the hardwood floor of the foyer. I do not immediately leave my study. I open the top drawer of my desk and retrieve a small, sleek object that resembles a standard black ink pen. It is a high-definition micro-recorder I purchased years ago for sensitive corporate negotiations. I press the tiny silver button on the cap. A microscopic green light flashes once, confirming the device is active and recording audio. I clip the pen securely to the inner pocket of my suit jacket. I stand up, smooth my lapels, and walk out into the hallway to meet my executioners. Valerie is standing in the center of the living room. She is wearing a dark, conservative dress, adopting the somber posture of a deeply concerned family member. Standing next to her is a woman I have never seen before. She is in her late 40s, wearing wire-rimmed glasses and carrying a thick leather briefcase. The stranger attempts to project an aura of warm professional empathy, but her eyes are sharp and calculating. They scan my living room, assessing the antique furniture and the expensive artwork, clearly calculating the total value of the estate she has been hired to help steal. Valerie steps forward and puts on her best performance of a loving daughter-in-law. She tells me she has been incredibly worried about me since our brief encounter at the real estate office. She claims my behavior there was disturbing and erratic. She introduces the woman beside her as Dr. Aris, a specialized grief counselor who works extensively with the elderly. Valerie insists that she brought the doctor here purely out of love to help me process the overwhelming trauma of losing Patricia. I do not yell. I do not ask them to leave. I invite them to sit down on the cream-colored sofa. I take my seat in the high-backed armchair directly across from them, ensuring the micro-recorder in my pocket has a clear, unobstructed line of audio to capture every single word. I offer them water, which they decline. I fold my hands in my lap and wait for the interrogation to begin. Dr. Aris opens her leather briefcase and extracts a yellow legal pad and a silver pen. She leans forward, adopting a soft, patronizing tone usually reserved for speaking to small children or the severely cognitively impaired. She begins by expressing her deepest condolences for my loss. Then the real work begins. She asks me how I am sleeping. She asks if I have been experiencing any memory lapses. She asks if I sometimes feel confused about where I am or what year it is. These are not the questions of a grief counselor helping a widower navigate sorrow. These are the standardized diagnostic questions used to establish a baseline for dementia and severe cognitive decline. Valerie is attempting to build a medical record of my incompetence right here in my own living room. She wants this doctor to write a sworn affidavit stating that I am incapable of managing my $50 million empire and my personal estate. I answer Dr. Aris with absolute calm. I state clearly that I sleep precisely 6 hours a night. I confirm the exact date, the current time down to the minute, and the specific address of the property we are sitting in. I look directly into her eyes and state that my memory has never been sharper. I am actively resisting the urge to show anger because anger is exactly what they want. They want me to become agitated and defensive so they can document my emotional instability. Dr. Aris realizes her initial approach is failing. She shifts her strategy and begins to ask highly manipulative leading questions. She asks if I often feel that my family is plotting against me. She asks if I have recently experienced any paranoid delusions about my money or my business. She leans closer and asks if my unexpected visit to the real estate office was driven by a sudden irrational fear that my loved ones were trying to steal my home. I look at Valerie, who is sitting next to the doctor, nodding along with feigned tragic concern. I turn my attention back to the doctor. I do not deny her accusations with emotional outrage. I respond with terrifying clinical precision. I inform Dr. Aris that a concern is only defined as paranoia when it lacks an empirical foundation in reality. I state clearly that my presence at the real estate office was not driven by a delusion, but by a confirmed security alert detailing unauthorized entry into my home. I explain that the fear of financial theft ceases to be irrational the moment unauthorized proxy freezes are executed on personal banking accounts. I do not stop there. I shift my posture, leaning forward and locking my eyes onto the doctor. I inform her that I am acutely aware of the specific legal thresholds required to establish medical power of attorney. I calmly recite the exact federal statutes concerning elder financial abuse and the severe criminal penalties associated with medical professionals who knowingly participate in fraudulent competency evaluations for the purpose of asset seizure. I list the specific prison sentences for medical malpractice, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit extortion. The atmosphere in the living room changes instantly. The temperature seems to drop 10 degrees. Dr. Aris stops writing on her yellow legal pad. Her pen hovers frozen above the paper. She looks at me, and for the first time she realizes she is not interrogating a confused, grieving old man. She is sitting across from a highly lucid corporate executive who is actively building a legal case against her. I slowly reach into my jacket pocket and tap the silver clip of my pen, drawing her direct attention to the device. I casually mention that I find it extremely helpful to record all medical consultations to ensure I do not forget any of the professional advice I am given. I ask her to explicitly state her full medical license number for the recording, so my personal attorneys can properly verify her credentials with the state medical board before we proceed with the evaluation. Dr. Aris turns completely pale. The blood drains from her face as the reality of her situation crashes down on her. She looks at Valerie with an expression of sheer terror. She realizes she has been dragged into a massive high-stakes criminal conspiracy, and she is currently generating actionable recorded evidence that could destroy her career and send her to federal prison. She abruptly snaps her legal pad shut and shoves it back into her briefcase. She stands up so quickly she nearly knocks over the coffee table. She stammers a frantic apology, stating she has just remembered an urgent medical emergency at her clinic and must leave immediately. Valerie stands up, confused and angry, trying to grab the doctor's arm, demanding that she finish the evaluation. Dr. Aris violently shakes off Valerie's hand. She practically runs toward the front door, her professional facade completely shattered by panic. The heavy oak door slams shut behind Thasaintu, the fleeing doctor. Valerie is left standing alone in the center of my living room. She looks utterly foolish, her carefully constructed ambush entirely destroyed in less than 10 minutes. She turns to look at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred and frustration. I remain seated in my armchair, perfectly still. I do not smile. I do not gloat. I simply look at her and inform her that she has just exhausted her final psychological weapon. I suggest she contact a very good criminal defense attorney, because her time is rapidly running out. I stand up and walk back toward my study, leaving her alone with the absolute certainty of her impending ruin. The 48-hour waiting period stretches before me like a desolate wasteland. I remain inside my estate, moving through the empty rooms with the quiet discipline of a soldier preparing for a siege. I do not answer the frantic calls from my son. I ignore the heavy knocks on the front door from Valerie. My entire existence is currently suspended, waiting for the absolute confirmation of my genetic theory. On Thursday morning, my secured burner phone vibrates silently on the mahogany desk. I look at the glowing screen and see the encrypted number of the private forensics laboratory. I answer the call without hesitation. The senior technician speaks in a low professional tone. He informs me that the expedited profile is complete, but the results contain specific anomalies that require an in-person consultation. He refuses to send the data over an email server. I agree to his terms. We arrange to meet at a small, unremarkable diner on the industrial edge of the city, far away from the affluent neighborhoods where my daughter-in-law spends her stolen money. I drive my secondary vehicle, a modest dark sedan, to avoid drawing any attention. The diner is practically empty when I arrive. The smell of stale coffee and fried food hangs in the air. I spot the technician sitting in a corner booth wearing a gray trench coat and holding a thick manila envelope. I slide into the vinyl seat across from him. We do not exchange pleasantries. He understands the gravity of the situation and pushes the sealed envelope across the scratched laminate table. I break the seal and extract the heavy stack of laboratory documents. The top page displays the comparative genetic analysis between my established bloodline and the swab sample I procured from the crystal glass. My eyes bypass the complex scientific jargon and the dense columns of genetic markers. I scan the page looking for the final conclusive percentage. I find it printed boldly at the bottom of the summary paragraph. The probability of biological relation is absolute 0. The technician leans forward, resting his forearms on the table. He explains the data with a clinical detachment that I deeply appreciate. He tells me they ran the sample through 3 separate sequencing protocols to eliminate any possibility of a false negative. The genetic markers extracted from the boy possess 0 intersection with the paternal Bennett lineage. The boy carries distinct, dominant alleles that do not exist anywhere within my family genetic code. The technician points to a specific cluster of data on the second page. He informs me that he took the initiative to cross-reference the boy's genetic anomalies against established regional databases to identify potential paternal origin markers. The results indicate a highly specific regional genetic profile that completely contradicts Valerie's documented ancestry. I sit in the quiet diner, absorbing the absolute finality of the paper in my hands. The biological fraud is no longer just a theory built on blood types. It is a certified scientific fact. My son Adam has spent the last 14 years raising a stranger. He has poured his heart, his resources, and his loyalty into a child who shares absolutely none of his blood. Valerie has manipulated him into loving a ghost. She has used this fraudulent child as the ultimate anchor to secure her position within my family and to justify her hostile takeover of my empire. She built a fortress of lies on the foundation of a fake heir. I thank the technician for his absolute discretion and slide a second thick envelope of cash across the table to compensate him for the personal delivery. I leave the diner feeling a profound coldness settling deeply into my bones. Knowing the boy is not my grandson is only the first piece of the puzzle. I must discover exactly whose blood runs through his veins. I need to understand the complete architecture of Valerie's deception before I crush it. I drive to a secure underground parking garage in the financial district and use a prepaid mobile phone to contact a man named Silas. Silas is an independent corporate espionage investigator whom I have retained in the past to dismantle rival logistics companies. He does not ask questions about morality. He only requires clear objectives and substantial funding. I meet Silas in the shadows of the concrete garage. I hand him a dossier containing photographs of Valerie and her supposed brother Vincent. I provide him with their known addresses, their vehicle registration numbers, and their daily routines. I instruct Silas to initiate a maximum pressure surveillance operation. I want every movement, every phone call, and every interaction documented over the next 48 hours. I specifically order him to focus on the dynamic between Valerie and Vincent. I explain that there is a massive financial hemorrhage connecting them, but I suspect the rot goes far deeper than corporate embezzlement. Silas nods, accepting the generous cash retainer, and disappears into the shadows. I spend the next 2 days meticulously organizing my corporate counteroffensive. I ensure the new ghost company is fully insulated and completely ready to absorb the final assets from Adam's dying branch. The silence from Valerie is deafening. She knows her psychiatric ambush failed spectacularly, and she is currently regrouping to figure out her next angle of attack. She has absolutely no idea that a highly trained predator is currently tracking her every waking moment. Exactly 48 hours later, Silas contacts me. We arrange to meet in my private study back at the estate. It is late evening when he arrives, stepping silently through the side entrance I left unlocked for him. Silas stands in front of my desk and opens a thick leather satchel. He does not speak immediately. He simply begins to lay high-resolution photographs across the polished mahogany surface. I look down at the images. The first photograph shows Valerie and Vincent sitting together in a secluded booth at a luxury hotel bar. They are not behaving like siblings discussing family matters. Their body language is intensely intimate. Vincent has his hand resting high on Valerie's thigh. The second photograph was taken through the window of a private yacht docked at the marina. It shows the two of them locked in a passionate embrace completely devoid of any familial boundaries. Silas begins to explain his findings in a low, gravelly voice. He tells me he tracked them from the hotel to a private residential property registered under another one of Vincent's shell companies. They spent 14 hours inside that property alone. But the physical infidelity is only the surface of the revelation. Silas places a final document on my desk. It is a comprehensive background check he pulled from deep state records. He informs me that he dug into their supposed family history. Valerie and Vincent do not share parents. They do not share a childhood home. There are no birth certificates linking them as brother and sister. Vincent is an alias. His real name is Victor, and he has an extensive history of confidence scams and wire fraud across 3 different states. He is not her brother. He is her long-term lover and her dedicated criminal co-conspirator. The true nightmare of their long con finally materializes in front of my eyes. Valerie did not simply cheat on my son and accidentally get pregnant. This was a deliberate, calculated parasitic invasion from the very beginning. Valerie and Vincent targeted my son 15 years ago because they identified him as the weak, vulnerable heir to a massive fortune. They fabricated the pregnancy together. They invented the brother and sister dynamic to ensure Vincent could maintain a constant physical presence in Valerie's life without arousing suspicion. They designed this entire reality to slowly bleed my $50 million empire dry from the inside out. I look at the timeline Silas has constructed. I look at the physical traits of the man in the photographs. The square jaw, the dark eyes, the specific build. It matches my supposed grandson perfectly. Vincent is not the uncle. Vincent is the biological father of Leo. The sheer magnitude of their depravity is almost impossible to comprehend. They have lived inside my family for a decade and a half, eating at my dinner table, sleeping under my roof, and stealing my son's life away from him. They have laughed at our grief and celebrated their slow, quiet theft. I dismiss Silas, thanking him for his flawless execution. I sit alone in my study, staring at the undeniable proof of their destruction. They wanted to take my company and my home. They wanted to erase my legacy. But they have handed me the very weapon I need to obliterate them completely. The inheritance meeting is tomorrow, and I am going to bury them alive under the weight of their own lies. The heavy tires of my son's luxury sedan crush the gravel of my front driveway. I sit behind the polished mahogany of my desk and wait. I know exactly why they have come. The silence of the sprawling estate is broken by the familiar sound of the heavy front door swinging open. Footsteps echo down the long hallway. One set is sharp and aggressive, the rhythmic clicking of expensive heels. The other set is hesitant and dragging, the sound of a man who knows he is walking into a room to betray his own blood. Valerie enters my private study first. She does not knock. She marches across the Persian rug with the absolute confidence of a conqueror stepping onto a defeated battlefield. Adam trails closely behind her, keeping his eyes firmly fixed on the floorboards. He looks pale and exhausted, shifting his weight nervously from one foot to the other. He refuses to look his father in the eye. Valerie carries a massive bound stack of legal paper in her hands. She does not offer a greeting. She does not ask how I am coping with the loss of my wife. She simply raises the thick stack of documents and drops it aggressively onto the center of my desk. The heavy thud echoes off the wood-paneled walls of the quiet room. She places her hands flat on the desk and leans forward, invading my space. She tells me the grieving period is over. She says the corporate board is growing restless and the regional managers need clear direction. She claims the market is too volatile for Bennett Logistics to be managed by a man who is completely distracted by personal sorrow. She taps her perfectly manicured fingernail against the cover page of the massive contract. She demands I sign over all my voting shares to Adam immediately. She tells me it is the only way to protect the legacy of the company and secure a stable future for my grandson Leo. She uses the boy as a shield, wrapping her greed in the illusion of maternal concern. She says Patricia would have wanted Leo to inherit a thriving empire, not a crumbling business run by a stubborn old man. I look past her and focus my gaze entirely on Adam. My son stands in the corner of the room, wringing his hands together. I ask him if this is truly what he wants. I ask him if he is ready to take the full weight of a $50 million empire onto his shoulders. Adam swallows hard and finally forces himself to meet my eyes. He mutters a pathetic, rehearsed speech about shifting logistics paradigms and the necessity of aggressive modernization. He tells me I have worked hard enough and that I deserve to rest. His voice lacks any conviction. He sounds like a hostage reading a ransom note written by his captors. He is terrified of his wife and utterly desperate to secure the funds necessary to cover the massive fraud he committed with her secret lover. I do not raise my voice. I reach into my breast pocket and pull out my wire-rimmed reading glasses. I unfold them carefully and slide them onto my face. I pull the heavy 60-page document toward me. Valerie sighs loudly, crossing her arms over her chest. She tells me the contract is standard corporate transition boilerplate. She insists there is no need for me to read it, and that her lawyers have already verified every single clause. She pushes a silver pen across the desk, urging me to just sign the final page so we can all move forward. I ignore her completely. I built an international supply chain from the ground up. I have negotiated with ruthless corporate raiders, federal regulators, and union leaders. I know how to spot a trap hidden inside a labyrinth of legal jargon. I open the document and begin to scan the pages. The first few sections are exactly what she claimed. They outline the standard transfer of executive authority and the reassignment of corporate voting shares to Adam. But as I flip deeper into the dense paragraphs, the true nature of her plan reveals itself. The contract is absolute poison. It is a carefully engineered financial execution designed to leave me completely destitute. I locate a buried clause on page 24. It explicitly revokes the lifetime founder pension I established decades ago. It surrenders all my rights to future corporate dividends and severs my access to the company-sponsored medical trust. I turn to page 38 and find an even more devastating stipulation. The contract includes a binding property transfer masquerading as an estate stabilization maneuver. By signing the document, I would be legally gifting my primary estate directly into an irrevocable trust controlled entirely by Valerie on behalf of her son Leo. It would validate the 30-day eviction notice she handed me on the day of my wife's funeral and strip me of any legal right to contest my removal from the property. Valerie is not just trying to take my company. She is trying to erase me from existence. She wants to leave me without an income, without a home, and without the means to afford basic medical care. She wants me to die quietly in poverty while she lives in my house and spends the fortune I built. I feel a surge of intense rage building in my chest, but I crush it down instantly. If I confront her about the poisoned clauses, she will simply pivot to her alternate strategy. She will claim my paranoia is proof of cognitive decline and accelerate her attempts to have me declared mentally incompetent. She has already paid a federal informant $50,000 to forge fake medical documents. I cannot fight her here in this study. I must dictate the battlefield. I must give her a false sense of absolute victory to set the final stage. I close the thick contract. I slowly remove my reading glasses and place them on the desk. I let out a long, trembling breath. I intentionally slump my shoulders forward, allowing my posture to collapse into the shape of a broken, defeated old man. I rub my eyes with trembling hands, simulating deep physical and emotional exhaustion. I look up at Valerie with an expression of profound surrender. I tell her she is right. I tell her I am simply too tired to carry the burden of the company anymore. I admit that the grief of losing Patricia has drained all the fight out of me. I look at Adam and tell him I am proud he is finally stepping up to take control of the family legacy. I play the role of the submissive, cooperative victim flawlessly. Valerie's posture relaxes. The aggressive tension leaves her shoulders. A wide, triumphant smirk spreads across her face. She believes she has completely broken my spirit. She pushes the silver pen closer to my hand and tells me to just sign the bottom line so I can finally rest. I pick up the pen, but I let my hand shake violently. I drop the pen onto the contract. I tell her I will sign every single page and give them everything they are asking for. But I insist that a transition of this magnitude cannot be done casually in a private study. I tell her that to ensure the corporate board honors the transition without challenging Adam's authority, we must follow strict formal protocols. I demand an official inheritance meeting. I tell her we must gather on Friday morning in the main conference room at the corporate headquarters. I state that our senior corporate lawyer, Mr. Wallace, must be present to officially notarize the signatures and file the transition documents directly with the State Commerce Department. I explain that this is the only way to make the transfer bulletproof and secure Leo's future permanently. Valerie considers my proposal. Her eyes narrow as she calculates the risks. She knows Mr. Wallace is a rigid traditional lawyer, but she also believes the contract is watertight. She thinks my demand for formality is just the last pathetic grasp at dignity from a dying king. The prospect of having the entire corporate transition legally solidified and notarized on Friday is too tempting for her to refuse. She smiles warmly, feigning a sudden burst of familial affection. She tells me that Friday is perfectly acceptable. She reaches across the desk and pats my hand with her cold fingers, telling me I am making the right choice for everyone. She picks up the heavy contract and places it back into her designer bag. She turns to Adam and tells him it is time to go. Adam finally looks at me. He opens his mouth as if he wants to say something, perhaps offer an apology for watching his wife try to financially execute his own father. But Valerie snaps his name sharply from the hallway and he flinches. He turns away and follows her out the door without uttering a single word. I sit in my study and listen to their footsteps fade away. I hear the front door close and the luxury sedan drive away down the gravel path. The house is completely silent once more. My slumped posture vanishes. I sit up perfectly straight. I reach into my pocket and pull out the encrypted mobile phone connecting me directly to the Swiss banking representative and my private investigator. Valerie believes Friday will be her coronation. She has absolutely no idea she has just scheduled her own funeral. The pieces are all perfectly aligned on the board, and the inheritance meeting will be the execution she never sees coming. The morning is silent and still. I stand by the bay window in my main living room, holding a cup of black coffee. I watch a sleek silver luxury sedan pull through the wrought iron gates of my property. It glides up the long driveway and stops directly in front of the main entrance. A man steps out of the driver's side door. He is wearing a tailored navy suit and carrying a digital clipboard. He looks up at the stone facade of my home with the hungry, calculating eyes of a predator, assessing a very lucrative kill. He is not a friend dropping by to offer his condolences for the loss of my wife. He is a high-end real estate broker. Valerie could not even wait 24 hours after handing me that poisoned contract in my study. Her greed is an uncontrollable addiction. She needs immediate liquid capital to feed Vincent and cover the catastrophic debts my son Adam has accumulated under her direction. She has scheduled an appraisal to arrange a quiet off-market cash sale before the ink on her fraudulent corporate transfer is even meant to dry on Friday. The doorbell echoes through the quiet house. I place my coffee cup on a stone coaster. I walk to the front door and pull it open. The man flashes a bright, rehearsed smile showing perfectly white teeth. He introduces himself as a senior partner at the most exclusive luxury brokerage in the city. He extends his hand and offers a brief, superficial apology for my recent loss, before immediately pivoting to business. He tells me my daughter-in-law Valerie contacted his firm early this morning. He claims she authorized a comprehensive interior appraisal to prepare the estate for a rapid private listing. He says Valerie assured his firm that I am preparing to move into an assisted living facility by the end of the month. He states she promised the property title is already transitioning into a family trust controlled by her son Leo. I do not block the doorway. I do not shout at the broker for trespassing on my private property. I step aside and politely invite him inside. I tell him I completely understand the necessity of moving quickly in a volatile housing market. The broker steps into the grand foyer, clearly relieved that he does not have to deal with a confused or combative old man. His eyes immediately dart toward the crown, molding the imported Italian marble floors and the grand, sweeping staircase. He taps the screen of his digital tablet, entering rapid calculations. He tells me the market for historic properties with this specific acreage is incredibly aggressive right now. He estimates Valerie could secure a cash buyer willing to pay millions above the standard market rate if we keep the sale completely discreet. I play the role of the gracious, accommodating host. I guide him through the formal dining room and into the expansive sunroom. I let him admire the custom woodwork and the panoramic views of the manicured grounds. I listen as he lists the aggressive marketing strategies he plans to employ to liquidate my home. He talks about knocking down walls and tearing out the historic gardens to appeal to foreign investors. He is visualizing a massive commission check. Valerie has promised him the listing of a lifetime. She has dispatched this man to carve up my sanctuary and convert my history into a quick wire transfer to cover her criminal tracks. I guide the broker down the main hallway and invite him into my private study. I tell him I have some specific documentation he will need for his appraisal portfolio. He eagerly follows me inside, taking a seat in one of the leather guest chairs opposite my desk. He readies his digital tablet, expecting me to hand him the property blueprints or the recent tax assessments. I walk behind my heavy mahogany desk. I do not pull out blueprints. I open the top drawer and extract a thick document bound in dark blue legal backing. It is not the fraudulent contract Valerie dropped on this exact desk yesterday. It is a certified, legally binding instrument I finalized with my personal attorneys at dawn. I slide the heavy document across the polished wood surface. I tell the broker he needs to review the primary clause on the second page before he calculates his final commission. He picks up the document with a confident smile. His eyes scan the thick legal text. I watch the blood completely drain from his face. The confident smile disintegrates into an expression of sheer professional panic. He is holding a certified copy of an irrevocable Century Trust. I explain the legal parameters to him with a quiet, terrifying calm. I filed this document at the state registry just hours ago. The estate has been permanently locked inside a blind trust that only I control. I watch the broker swallow hard as he reads the restrictive covenants. I tell him the property cannot be sold. It cannot be legally transferred to a family member. It cannot be used as collateral for a commercial loan, and it cannot be subdivided for commercial development. The trust permanently and legally freezes the entire estate until the year 2100. No signature from my son Adam, and no fraudulent proxy document from my daughter-in-law Valerie can override a state-certified irrevocable trust. The house is completely immune to any financial leverage. The broker slowly lowers the document. He looks at me and realizes he has stepped into the middle of a massive family war. He realizes Valerie lied to him entirely. She sent him to appraise a property she has absolutely zero legal authority to sell. He understands that if he attempts to list this house, he will face immediate litigation and potential disbarment for participating in attempted property fraud. He sets the document back on the desk as if it were burning his fingers. He stands up incredibly fast. He begins stammering profound apologies. He tells me there has clearly been a massive miscommunication and that his firm cannot be involved in contested family assets. I do not stop him as he practically runs out of my study. I follow him to the front door at a leisurely pace. He does not say goodbye. He rushes down the front steps, gets into his luxury sedan, and drives away so fast the tires kick up gravel from my driveway. I stand in the open doorway and breathe in the crisp morning air. Valerie thought she could secretly liquidate my home to secure a massive cash infusion before the inheritance meeting on Friday. She thought she could outsmart me while I was blinded by grief. Instead, her primary financial escape route has just been permanently sealed in concrete. She has no access to my corporate accounts. She has no access to my personal offshore funds. And now she has absolutely no way to convert my physical estate into the cash she desperately needs to pay off the massive corporate debts she accumulated with her lover Vincent. The walls are closing in on her rapidly. She will receive a very angry phone call from that real estate broker within the next 10 minutes. She will realize her immediate cash grab strategy has been utterly destroyed. The panic will begin to set in. She will become desperate. She will demand that Friday arrives faster so she can finally secure the corporate voting shares she thinks will save her. I close the heavy front door and lock the deadbolt. The trap is perfectly primed and she is walking straight into the jaws of the final execution. I sit perfectly still at my desk, watching the high-definition security feed broadcast directly to my secure laptop. The camera captures the main lobby of Bennett Logistics headquarters. It is Thursday morning. The Friday inheritance meeting is exactly 24 hours away. Valerie has realized that her access to my personal wealth is completely blocked. She has realized she cannot sell my house. She has clearly ordered her husband to storm the corporate office and seize the remaining liquid capital by force. I watch the glass doors slide open. My son Adam marches into the building. He is wearing an expensive tailored suit, but he looks entirely disheveled. He is sweating profusely. He bypasses the reception desk and walks straight toward the private executive elevators. He swipes his regional management badge. The light flashes green. He steps inside. He thinks he is ascending to his throne. He has absolutely no idea he is walking directly onto a trapdoor. I switch the camera feed to the main executive boardroom on the top floor. My three most loyal executives are already seated around the long, polished mahogany table. I briefed them early this morning. I told them exactly what Adam would do and exactly how they must respond. They are waiting for him with absolute professional discipline. The heavy double doors of the boardroom swing open violently. Adam steps inside. He does not ask for permission to interrupt their meeting. He throws a thick stack of printed banking statements onto the center of the table. He is breathing heavily. His face is flushed red with panic and manufactured rage. He points a shaking finger at my chief financial officer. He loudly demands to know why the regional distribution hub accounts have been completely frozen. He says he has vendors threatening to halt operations. He says he has critical supply chain invoices that require immediate capital release. He is lying. He does not have legitimate vendors waiting for payment. He has Vincent waiting for his stolen money. Adam paces back and forth across the thick carpet. He tells the board members that I am suffering from severe grief-induced cognitive decline. He claims my mind is deteriorating rapidly after burying my wife. He tells them he is officially taking control of the company early to prevent my erratic decisions from destroying the empire. He demands they manually override the financial freeze and release $4 million into his regional operating account immediately. He warns them that anyone who disobeys his direct command will be terminated the moment he officially assumes the position of Chief Executive Officer tomorrow morning. The executives do not flinch. They do not argue with my son. They do not defend my mental capacity or ask him to calm down. They sit in complete and utter silence. They let his frantic threats echo off the wood-paneled walls. The silence stretches for an agonizing minute. Adam stops pacing. The absolute lack of resistance confuses him. He expects a fight. He expects to bully them using my impending retirement as leverage. He does not know how to handle three powerful corporate officers looking at him with nothing but cold, clinical pity. They remember him as a child running around the shipping warehouses. But right now, they only see a corporate traitor attempting to extort his own father. My chief financial officer slowly stands up from his leather chair. He does not raise his voice. He calmly informs Adam that the regional accounts were not frozen due to a technical error or an erratic administrative glitch. He states that the financial architecture of Bennett Logistics was permanently altered on Wednesday afternoon by a direct executive order invoking the Founder Clause. He tells Adam that the regional distribution hub he manages no longer possesses any operational capital because it is no longer an integrated division of the parent company. Adam stares at him in absolute confusion. He stammers, asking what the chief financial officer is talking about. The executive reaches into his leather briefcase. He extracts a single piece of heavy white paper. He slides it smoothly across the mahogany table until it rests directly in front of my son. He tells Adam to review the updated corporate organizational chart. Adam reaches for the paper. His hands are trembling so violently he can barely hold it steady. I watch the live feed closely, zooming the camera in on his face. I want to see the exact moment the realization shatters his entire reality. Adam scans the top of the page. He sees the primary corporate umbrella. He traces the lines flowing downward to the national shipping divisions, the international freight partnerships, and the massive commercial client portfolios. He looks for his regional hub. He looks for the sprawling warehouses and the massive revenue streams he has been systematically draining for the past 18 months. He does not find them. He traces a single isolated line branching off to the very bottom corner of the page. He finds his name. Adam is listed as the sole chief executive officer of a newly formed, completely independent subsidiary corporation. The chief financial officer politely explains the new operational reality. He informs Adam that all active client contracts, all legitimate supply chain routes, and all incoming revenue streams have been legally migrated away from his branch. The subsidiary Adam now completely controls is entirely empty. It possesses zero active clients. It generates absolutely zero revenue. It holds only one specific type of asset. The asset is debt. The corporate lawyers surgically isolated every single fraudulent invoice Adam signed and approved over the last year and a half. They packed every ghost freight run and every fabricated fuel surcharge directly into his new independent subsidiary. The parent company has formally disavowed the fraudulent contracts, leaving the liability squarely on the individual who authorized them. The chief financial officer looks my son directly in the eyes. He calmly states that the subsidiary Adam now owns holds exactly $4 million in outstanding corporate debt, owed directly to the shell company controlled by Valerie and Vincent. Adam drops the piece of paper. He stumbles backward, hitting the edge of the conference table. The blood completely drains from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost. He realizes the absolute brilliance of the trap. He cannot sue the parent company for freezing his funds because he is no longer part of the parent company. He cannot report the financial maneuver to the authorities without inviting a federal audit that will immediately expose his massive embezzlement ring. He has been legally and surgically severed from the true empire. He thought his status as the bloodline heir made him untouchable, but he is learning the brutal reality of corporate law. He is stranded on an isolated financial island, carrying millions of dollars in fraudulent debt that he is now personally and legally responsible to pay. He knows Vincent will not accept excuses. Vincent will demand his stolen money, and Valerie will offer no protection. Adam has nothing left to give them. He is entirely bankrupt. My son stands in the boardroom completely paralyzed by terror. He looks at the three executives, begging them to help him. He asks them to call me. He pleads with them to undo the transition. The chief legal counsel simply shakes her head. She informs him that the restructuring is legally binding and absolutely permanent. She advises him to leave the building immediately and consult his personal financial advisors. Adam turns around and walks toward the heavy double doors. He is no longer marching like a conqueror. He is dragging his feet like a man walking to the gallows. He pushes the doors open and disappears into the hallway. I close my laptop. The proxy war is over. Valerie sent him to breach my fortress, and he has returned to her with nothing but a death sentence. They have no money. They have no leverage. They have no escape. Tomorrow is Friday. Tomorrow is the official inheritance meeting. They will walk into that conference room completely desperate, hoping that the final contract will somehow save their lives. They have absolutely no idea I am about to deliver the final lethal blow. The sun rises on Friday morning, piercing the heavy curtains of my master bedroom. Today is the day I amputate the infection from my family tree. I do not feel the crushing weight of grief that consumed me earlier this week. I feel the cold, sharp precision of a surgeon holding a scalpel. I walk to my closet and select a dark, charcoal bespoke suit tailored perfectly to my frame. I put on a crisp white shirt and carefully tie a solid crimson silk tie. This is not the attire of a defeated old man preparing for a quiet retirement in some forgotten coastal facility. This is the armor of a chief executive officer walking into a corporate execution. I pick up my secured phone and dial the private cell number of Mr. Wallace, my senior corporate attorney. He has represented my empire for over 30 years, handling my most aggressive acquisitions and defending my most sensitive assets. I tell him the final transition documents are ready for execution. I instruct him to prepare the main conference room on the top floor of the headquarters. I give him highly specific orders regarding the layout of the room. I want 5 chairs placed around the heavy mahogany table. I want security personnel stationed silently outside the frosted glass doors ready to move on my command. I tell him to bring the certified forensic documents and the sealed financial audits we prepared. He does not ask unnecessary questions. He simply confirms the arrangements and promises to be waiting for me. I sit at my desk and open my encrypted email server. I must ensure the predators walk willingly into the cage. If I only invite Adam and Valerie, the trap will remain incomplete. I need the true architect of the biological and financial fraud sitting directly across from me when the floor drops out from underneath them. I draft a formal digital invitation addressed to my son and my daughter-in-law. I use clinical corporate language. I inform them that the full transfer of voting shares and the transition of executive power will be finalized at precisely 10 in the morning. I state that the inheritance meeting will proceed exactly as Valerie requested in my study 2 days prior. Then I cast the final hook. I include a specific mandatory request for the attendance of Vincent. I refer to him in the email as our most crucial regional vendor and a vital stakeholder in the future expansion of Bennett Logistics. I state that his presence is required to sign the updated long-term supply chain contracts, aligning with Adam's new leadership. It is a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. Valerie and Vincent are desperate. Their hidden shell company is starving for capital after I severed their access to the regional hub. The promise of signing massive new contracts directly with the parent company will completely blind them to the danger. They will view this invitation as their ultimate victory. They will walk into my headquarters believing they are about to conquer an empire and secure an endless stream of stolen wealth. I leave my estate and drive toward the towering glass structure of my corporate headquarters. The city traffic moves sluggishly around me, but my pulse remains steady. I pull into the underground executive garage and take the private elevator to the top floor. The corporate suite is unusually quiet. The regular staff has been instructed to remain on the lower levels for the duration of the morning, ensuring absolute privacy for the impending slaughter. I walk into the main conference room. The space is vast and intimidating, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling urban skyline. Mr. Wallace is already seated at the far end of the massive mahogany table. His thick leather briefcase rests in front of him. We exchange a brief silent nod. We do not need to review the plan. The legal snare is perfectly constructed and waiting to snap shut. I take my seat at the absolute head of the table. I rest my hands flat on the polished wood surface. I look at the 3 empty chairs positioned directly across from me. I control my breathing. I clear my mind of any lingering paternal affection I might still harbor for the man I raised. Adam chose his allegiance when he handed me over to these parasites. He watched his wife try to financially execute me, and he chose cowardice over loyalty. Today, I will judge him not as a grieving father, but as the founder of the legacy he attempted to destroy. At exactly 5 minutes to 10, the heavy frosted glass doors of the conference room swing open. Valerie enters the room first. She is wearing a striking designer suit, radiating absolute arrogance. She walks with her chin held high, her eyes gleaming with the anticipation of massive, unearned wealth. She looks around the opulent boardroom, as if measuring it for new curtains, already picturing her name on the executive letterhead. Following closely behind her is Vincent. He is a tall, broad-shouldered man, wearing an expensive tailored jacket that cannot quite hide his predatory nature. He carries a sleek leather portfolio, stepping into my sanctuary with the swagger of a thief who believes he has just successfully robbed the bank. They look at me sitting quietly at the head of the table and exchange a quick, triumphant smirk. They believe they are looking at a defeated king ready to hand over his crown. Adam enters last. He does not share their victorious energy. He looks physically sick. His face is pale and his eyes are heavily bloodshot. He walks with a slight stoop, keeping his gaze firmly fixed on the carpet. He remembers the brutal reality of his isolated, hollow subsidiary. He knows the corporate treasury is locked, and he knows his regional branch holds $4 million in debt, but he is too terrified of Valerie and Vincent to warn them. He has been dragged into this room as a human shield, carrying the full weight of the massive liabilities he can never repay. He is walking a tightrope between my wrath and their greed, and he knows a single misstep means total ruin. Valerie and Vincent take their seats directly across from me. Adam slumps into the chair beside his wife, attempting to make himself as small as possible. Valerie leans forward, resting her manicured hands on the table. She smiles a cold, practiced smile and tells me she is glad I finally saw a reason. She says this transition is the best possible outcome for the family. Vincent nods in agreement, adopting the false professional tone of a legitimate business partner. He tells me it is an honor to witness the transition of such a historic company, and that he looks forward to a highly profitable relationship with the new administration. I do not return their smiles. I do not offer a polite greeting. I sit in my bespoke suit, radiating a deep, terrifying calm. The air in the room becomes incredibly heavy. Valerie's smile falters slightly as she registers the absolute absence of grief or defeat in my eyes. She expects to see a broken old man eager to sign his life away to escape the pressure. Instead, she is looking at a predator perfectly positioned at the top of the food chain, holding all the leverage. The heavy glass doors click shut, sealing them inside. The trap is now fully locked. I turn my head slightly and look at my attorney. The time for pretending is over. The execution is about to begin. The grandfather clock in the corner of the executive boardroom ticks with a heavy metallic rhythm. The sound echoes across the vast expanse of the polished mahogany table. I sit perfectly still at the head of the room, with my hands folded neatly in front of me. Behind me, the floor-to-ceiling glass windows offer a sweeping, panoramic view of the city skyline. This is the absolute summit of Bennett logistics. I built this empire over 4 decades of relentless labor and calculated strategy. I have sat in this exact chair and negotiated with ruthless commercial competitors, aggressive union leaders, and federal auditors. I have never lost a battle in this room. Today, I am not negotiating a commercial contract. I am executing a precision strike against the parasites who have invaded my family. The 3 predators are seated directly across the wide table from me. They are practically vibrating with toxic anticipation. Valerie sits in the center, projecting the absolute arrogance of a victorious queen. She is wearing a striking designer suit that she likely purchased using the funds her hidden lover stole from my corporate treasury. Her eyes constantly dart toward the thick leather-bound folio resting on the table in front of my senior corporate attorney, Mr. Wallace. She firmly believes that folio holds the keys to my $50 million empire. She is entirely convinced it contains the irrevocable transfer of my executive voting shares and the legal surrender of my primary residential estate. She has absolutely no idea she is staring directly at her own execution block. Sitting to her right is Vincent. He exudes the relaxed, arrogant confidence of a criminal who believes he has just successfully pulled off the ultimate heist. He checks his expensive gold watch with a theatrical sigh, clearly bored by the legal formalities. He wants his money. He expects me to sign the lucrative vendor contracts that will permanently legitimize his massive embezzlement ring. He wants to secure the millions of dollars he siphoned from my son and walk out the front doors of my headquarters as a fully integrated corporate partner. He leans back in his plush leather chair, crossing his legs, assuming he holds all the leverage in the world. Sitting to her left is my son Adam. He does not share their victorious energy. He looks physically sick. His face is pale and his eyes are heavily bloodshot. He walks a dangerous tightrope between his terrifying wife and his furious father. Adam sits with a severe slouch, keeping his gaze firmly locked on the surface of the mahogany table. He refuses to look at his wife, his hidden lover, or me. He knows the regional branch he manages is now a hollow shell carrying $4 million in fraudulent debt. He knows he has been legally severed from the true empire. He is trapped in a burning building, but he lacks the courage to warn his CO conspirators. He is paralyzed by his own cowardice, simply waiting for the inevitable devastation to arrive. The silence in the boardroom stretches for an agonizing 2 minutes. I refuse to speak first. I refuse to offer a polite corporate greeting or acknowledge their presence. I sit in my bespoke charcoal suit, radiating a deep, terrifying calm. I let the absolute silence act as a psychological weight pressing down on their shoulders. I want them to feel the oppressive atmosphere of the room. Valerie begins to shift uncomfortably in her chair. The silence is not aligning with her expectations. She expects me to be sobbing. She expects a broken, grieving widower eager to sign his life away just to escape the overwhelming pressure of his sorrow. Valerie misinterprets my cold stillness entirely. She assumes my silence is a symptom of profound defeat. She assumes I am dragging out this meeting because I am mourning the loss of my wife Patricia and struggling to let go of my life work. Her patience completely evaporates. Her uncontrollable greed overrides any remaining shred of fake familial decorum. She wants her money, and she wants it right now. She cannot tolerate the idea of waiting another minute to claim her unearned throne. Valerie abruptly pushes her heavy leather chair backward. The wooden legs scrape harshly against the thick carpet. She stands up, drawing herself to her full height. She leans aggressively over the wide mahogany table, invading my physical space. She places both of her hands flat on the polished wood. She stares down at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. She drops the mask of the loving, concerned daughter-in-law entirely. She decides to use the most brutal, crude language possible to shatter whatever resistance she thinks I have left. She slams her hands on the mahogany table and delivers the line. "Now that the old woman is gone, you will put the company in my son's name and fend for yourself." The sheer disrespect of her words hangs in the sterile air of the boardroom. Calling my beloved Patricia the old woman just days after her funeral is a calculated attempt to break me emotionally. Valerie expects me to flinch. She expects me to lower my head in sorrow at the crude insult toward my dead wife. She expects me to quietly reach for a silver pen and sign my entire existence away to protect her fraudulent child. I do not flinch. I do not reach for a pen. I look directly into her hostile eyes. I feel a slow, terrifying smile spread across my face. It is not a smile of surrender. It is the smile of an apex predator watching a wounded deer walk willingly into a steel trap. I do not raise my voice. I do not offer a single word of defense or anger. I simply hold her gaze and let my smile widen. The absolute lack of fear in my expression causes her confidence to falter. The triumphant sneer on her face begins to crack. She realizes that the man sitting across from her is not a broken widower. She realizes that my silence was not born of grief, but of intense tactical calculation. A cold shadow of doubt crosses her eyes as she tries to understand why the victim she cornered is smiling at the executioner. I do not speak to Valerie. I slowly turn my head to my right. I look at my senior corporate attorney. I give Mr. Wallace a single silent nod. The execution protocol is officially authorized. Mr. Wallace does not say a word. His face is a mask of absolute legal detachment. He reaches out with slow, deliberate movements. He unfastens the heavy brass clasps on his thick leather-bound folio. The sound of the metal snapping open is sharp and final in the quiet room. Valerie, Vincent, and Adam lean forward collectively. Their eyes are glued to the leather folder. They are waiting for the massive stack of corporate stock transfers. They are waiting for the irrevocable real estate deeds. They are waiting for the lucrative vendor contracts that will permanently secure their stolen wealth. Mr. Wallace opens the folio. He does not pull out a stack of corporate transition agreements. He does not hand out company shares. He extracts 3 pristine white documents bound in heavy legal covers. He slides the first document across the smooth mahogany table directly toward Valerie. He slides the second document toward Vincent. He slides the third and final document toward my trembling son. The papers come to a rest perfectly positioned in front of them. The top pages bear the official embossed seal of the premier private forensics laboratory in the state. They are not corporate contracts. They are copies of a certified court, admissible forensic document. The absolute scientific proof of their destruction has just been served. The crisp white paper sits in front of the three predators, resting starkly against the dark wood of the conference table. Mr. Wallace clears his throat. The sound cuts through the heavy, suffocating silence of the boardroom, like the snap of a dry branch. He does not look at Valerie. He does not look at Vincent. He looks directly at the official document in his hands. He begins to read the certified forensic results in a flat, monotonous voice entirely devoid of any human emotion. He states the precise date of the genetic collection. He names the fully accredited and internationally recognized independent laboratory. He reads the specific legal identifiers and birth records attached to my 14-year-old grandson Leo. Then he arrives at the comparative analysis. Mr. Wallace reads the exact genetic markers belonging to my son Adam. He meticulously compares them to the biological sample extracted from the boy. He pauses for a fraction of a second, letting the anticipation stretch the tension in the room to its absolute breaking point. He announces to the room that the probability of a biological relationship between Adam Bennett and the boy is exactly 0%. Adam stops breathing. The air simply leaves his lungs. He looks down at the paper resting in front of him. His eyes dart back and forth across the printed text. He reads the 0% over and over again, as if the numbers are written in a foreign, unreadable language. The color drains completely from his face, leaving his skin the color of dirty ash. He slowly turns his head and looks at Valerie. He looks at the woman he married 15 years ago, the woman who convinced him to betray his own father and steal from his own family. Then he turns his head and looks at Vincent. He looks at the man he believed was his brother-in-law, the man he sat across from at Thanksgiving dinners, the man he committed federal wire fraud to protect. Mr. Wallace does not stop reading. He turns to the second page of the forensic report. He states that a cross-reference profile was conducted using a secondary biological sample acquired legally by a licensed private investigator. He announces the genetic markers belonging to the man sitting at the table, currently operating under the name Vincent. He reads the final conclusive scientific calculation. The probability of paternity between Vincent and the boy Leo is 99.9%. Vincent drops his arrogant posture instantly. The confident, superior smirk vanishes from his face, replaced by the hollow stare of a cornered animal. He pulls his hands off the mahogany table and sinks back into his plush leather chair. The criminal mind inside him calculates the angles and realizes the entire 15-year-long con has just been detonated. He understands that I did not just discover a corporate theft. I discovered the absolute rotting core of their existence. Valerie reacts entirely differently. Her initial shock instantly morphs into violent, frantic denial. She cannot accept that her flawless 15-year deception has been unraveled by a single sheet of paper. She slams both of her hands onto the table, the loud smack echoing through the vast room. She screams that the documents are completely fake. She shouts that I paid a corrupt doctor to print lies because I am a bitter, senile old man trying to destroy her perfect family. She points a shaking, manicured finger at my face, her voice pitching into a hysterical shriek. She threatens to sue me for defamation. She threatens to ruin my reputation in the press. She tells Adam not to listen to a single word being spoken. She grabs his arm violently, shaking him, demanding that he stand up and defend his wife and his legitimate son. Adam does not stand up. He physically pulls his arm away from her grasp, ripping his sleeve out of her hands. He shrinks away from her touch as if she is covered in venom. He looks at the facial structure of the man sitting across from him. He looks at Vincent, tracking the line of his jaw, his dark eyes, his broad shoulders. Adam realizes with absolute crushing certainty that the teenager living in his house, sleeping down the hall from him, is a perfect physical copy of the man sitting at this table. Adam lowers his head and buries his face in his trembling hands. A low, pathetic sob escapes his throat. He is completely broken. He has thrown away his legacy, his father, and his self-respect to serve a woman who used him to raise another man's child. I do not let Valerie continue screaming. I reach into my bespoke suit jacket. I extract a thick, sealed envelope. I open it and pull out a massive stack of highly detailed financial audits. I slide the heavy stack of papers across the polished mahogany surface. The pages spread out, fanning across the table directly in front of Valerie and Vincent. I speak for the first time since they entered the room. My voice is quiet, cold, and lethal. I tell Valerie that she is correct about one thing. The inheritance meeting is officially underway, and it is time to discuss the exact distribution of corporate assets. I instruct her to look at the top page of the audit. I explain that it is a complete unredacted ledger of the regional distribution hub managed by Adam over the past 18 months. I tell her my forensic accountants have isolated every single phantom freight run, every fabricated fuel surcharge, and every fraudulent vendor invoice. I point to the specific routing numbers connecting the massive corporate payouts directly to the anonymous shell company, controlled entirely by her hidden lover. I state the exact total of the stolen capital. $4 million systematically embezzled from Bennett Logistics. Vincent stares at the financial audit. He knows he has left a massive digital paper trail. He knows the federal authorities can freeze his illicit accounts with a single phone call. He looks at the frosted glass doors, silently calculating if he can stand up and run before the building security stops him. He knows he is trapped. I turn my full attention back to Valerie. She is staring at the financial documents, her chest heaving as she hyperventilates. The reality of the trap has finally closed its steel jaws around her neck. I deliver the final absolute legal checkmate. I explain the exact parameters of the Bennett family trust. I tell her that Patricia and I established the trust with highly specific, unbreakable bloodline stipulations. The language of the trust explicitly states that all corporate voting shares, all residential estates, and all liquid financial assets can only be inherited by direct, verified biological descendants of the Bennett family. Because the certified DNA test proves Adam is not the biological father of Leo, the boy is permanently and legally severed from the entire $50 million empire. I look directly into her panicked eyes. I tell her that her 15-year investment has yielded absolutely zero returns. She has no claim to the primary residential estate she tried to evict me from. She has no claim to the corporate treasury she tried to bleed dry. She is legally entitled to absolutely nothing. I lean forward slightly, resting my hands on the table. I inform her that the only thing she has successfully secured today is a mountain of irrefutable evidence proving she and her hidden lover committed massive corporate wire fraud, extortion, and federal embezzlement. She came to my corporate headquarters expecting to be crowned a queen ruling over a stolen empire. Instead, she has just been handed a one-way ticket to a federal penitentiary. The room descends into a suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of my son weeping softly into his hands. The empire is safe and the parasites have been entirely eradicated. The boardroom feels entirely devoid of oxygen. Valerie is staring at the audit papers as if they are actively burning her hands. Vincent has shifted his weight, preparing his muscles to bolt toward the heavy glass doors. I do not give him the opportunity to test the perimeter. I reach into the breast pocket of my bespoke suit and extract my secured mobile phone. I place it flat on the mahogany table. I tap the screen and dial a direct line I memorized 3 days ago. The call connects immediately to the local field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation Financial Crimes Division. I do not use a hushed or secretive tone. I speak clearly and deliberately, allowing every single syllable to echo off the wood-paneled walls. I identify myself as George Bennett, Chief Executive Officer of Bennett Logistics. I inform the federal agent on the line that I have 2 individuals currently sitting in my executive boardroom who have committed massive corporate wire fraud and federal embezzlement. I state their full legal names. I provide the exact routing numbers of the shell company they used to siphon $4 million from my regional distribution hub. I confirm that I possess a complete unredacted forensic audit ready for immediate transfer to federal prosecutors. Vincent stands up abruptly, his chair crashing backward onto the thick carpet. The illusion of the sophisticated business partner shatters completely, revealing the desperate street-level con artist beneath the expensive suit. He demands Valerie do something. He orders her to fix the situation, but she is entirely catatonic. Her pristine designer facade has melted into absolute terror. She realizes that her 15-year investment, her fraudulent child, and her hostile takeover have all culminated in a federal indictment. Before Vincent can take a single step toward the exit, the frosted glass doors swing open. I did not rely solely on the federal authorities to handle the immediate threat. My private corporate security team floods the boardroom. 4 heavily built men in dark suits surround the table. They do not ask politely. They seize Vincent by the arms, locking his wrists behind his back. He struggles, cursing and threatening them, but he is hopelessly outmatched. Valerie snaps out of her paralysis and begins to scream. The sound is piercing and hysterical. She thrashes wildly as the security officers grip her elbows. She screams that she is the mother of the Bennett heir. She demands that Adam order them to stop. She begs my son to protect her, shrieking that this is his fault for being so weak. Her screams echo down the executive hallway as the guards forcefully drag her out of my sanctuary. The heavy glass doors click shut behind them, severing their toxic presence from my company forever. The chaotic noise fades into absolute silence, leaving only the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock. I remain seated at the head of the table. Mr. Wallace, my senior attorney, quietly packs his leather folio, closes the brass clasps, and exits the room with a respectful nod. Only 2 people are left in the massive executive suite. I look down the length of the polished mahogany wood at my son. Adam has not moved from his chair. His posture is completely collapsed. He looks physically hollowed out, as if the revelation of the biological fraud and the financial devastation has extracted his very soul. He is staring at the empty space where his wife and her hidden lover were just sitting. He is a man who traded his entire legacy, his loyal father, and his own self-respect to serve a woman who used him to raise a stranger. He slowly lifts his head and looks at me. His eyes are filled with tears and a pathetic, desperate pleading. He expects me to offer a lifeline. He expects the unconditional love of a father to override the brutal reality of his corporate treason. He expects me to tell him that we can fix this together, that I will protect him from the federal fallout and the crushing debt of his isolated subsidiary. I do not offer him a single word of comfort. I do not stand up to embrace him. I look at him with the cold, detached evaluation of a chief executive officer viewing a catastrophic liability. I tell him that he made his choice the moment he stood silently in my study and allowed a parasite to hand me an eviction notice on the day of his mother's funeral. I tell him that he watched his wife attempt to strip me of my pension, my home, and my dignity, and he chose to be an accomplice to my execution. I inform him that the parent company will not absorb a single dollar of the fraudulent debt he accumulated. I state that he is now completely responsible for the hollow shell of a subsidiary he legally owns. He will have to face the federal investigators, the furious creditors, and the absolute ruin of his personal life entirely on his own. I do not yell or express anger. I simply present him with the unyielding consequences of his cowardice. The Bennett empire requires strength, loyalty, and absolute integrity. He possesses none of those qualities. He is no longer an heir to my legacy. I stand up, button my suit jacket, and walk toward the exit. I do not look back as his quiet sobbing fills the empty boardroom. I step into the private elevator and press the button for the ground floor. The cancer has been surgically removed. I walk out of the corporate headquarters and step into the bright afternoon sunlight. The air feels remarkably clean. I get into my car and drive away from the towering glass structures of the financial district. I navigate the winding suburban roads, watching the green canopy of the trees pass by my window. I feel an extraordinary sense of lightness settling into my chest. The heavy, suffocating burden of the last few days has been completely lifted. I pull through the wrought iron gates of my sprawling estate. The property is silent and secure. There are no hostile real estate agents measuring my antique furniture. There are no treacherous family members plotting to have me declared mentally incompetent. There is only the peaceful sanctuary that Patricia and I built together over 4 decades. I unlock the heavy oak front door and step into the foyer. I walk through the silent hallways and enter the sunroom overlooking the manicured historic gardens. I walk to the small mahogany wet bar in the corner. I retrieve a crystal wine glass and a bottle of a rare vintage red wine. It was Patricia's absolute favorite, carefully preserved for a special occasion. I pour a generous measure of the dark ruby liquid into the crystal glass. I open the French doors and step out onto the expansive stone porch. The late afternoon sun casts a warm golden glow across the lush green lawn. I take a slow, deep sip of the wine. The complex flavors settle on my palate, bringing a profound sense of closure. I sit down in my comfortable wicker chair and look out over the sprawling grounds of my estate. The predators who attempted to invade my home and steal my life's work have been utterly eradicated. They underestimated the quiet strength of the man they sought to destroy, and they paid the ultimate price for their arrogance. I did not simply defend my territory. I completely dismantled their false reality and reclaimed my absolute sovereignty. The foundation of my $50 million empire remains unshakable. My personal wealth is completely insulated. My home is permanently protected by an unbreakable legal trust. I think of Patricia, and I know she would be deeply proud of the ruthless precision I used to defend our legacy. The war is officially over. The storm has passed, leaving behind a perfect quiet clarity. I rest the crystal glass on the small table beside me and close my eyes, listening to the gentle rustling of the wind through the oak trees. For the first time since my wife passed away, I am entirely at peace. The ultimate lesson drawn from this corporate and familial battlefield is that true power does not need to shout. Predators often mistake silence for weakness and grief for vulnerability, but emotional restraint is the greatest weapon a person can wield. When you allow greed to blind your judgment, you inevitably dig your own grave. Family is not merely a biological connection or a legal entitlement. It is a bond forged through unwavering loyalty and mutual respect. The moment someone views you as a disposable resource rather than a human being, you owe them no protection, no inheritance, and absolutely no mercy. If you understand the absolute necessity of defending your dignity against toxic predators, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more relentless stories of justice.